we are at our first session of the day with Duolingo. We are talking about failure and imposter syndrome. And with us today, we have Dalia Shahata, and she is a senior university recruiter at Duolingo, supporting product management and design functions. She believes in the power of mentorships, and she loves supporting students and connecting them with great careers. So with that being said, I want y'all to show all the love to Dahlia in the emojis and in the chat. Take it away.
Cool. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, cool. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I am a senior recruiter at Duolingo. I am a pet parent and a Lego enthusiast. I also love to read. And I'm Egyptian, first gen, and I use the pronouns she, her. So I like to kind of just always start with these like three buckets of like work, home, and like who I am and my soul. So you get a little better understanding of me. But we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. It is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So let's first start with, what is imposter syndrome? Go ahead and throw it in the chat if you already know what it is. Yeah, feeling like you're not enough. Yeah, like you don't belong, feeling like you're lying about your skills. Yes. And you might be asking yourself, hey, what does Dahlia know about imposter syndrome? Like, what makes me the expert on talking about this? And quite frankly, there isn't anything, but that's kind of the whole point of imposter syndrome is I face it every day, which means that I can talk about it. But yeah, let's get into like textbook definitions. So imposter syndrome is really the feeling that everything that you do behind every achievement is a false positive, or it's good luck, or it's just a coincidence. It also is that kind of persistent fear that you are going to be discovered and outed as a fraud, right? So you're like, oh my gosh, I just interviewed for this job. I am totally not qualified for it. For some reason, I tricked my interviewers into thinking I'm qualified, and they are going to find out that I'm not, right? How many times have we felt that way? Raise your hand, everybody, right? But let me be very clear about something. Imposter syndrome is not a replacement for systemic racism, classism, and xenophobia. When the term imposter syndrome kind of became a thing, they actually completely categorically left out a lot of people of color. A lot of the time they left out women in this study of like what is imposter syndrome. And so I know that we all every day kind of face this like systemic racism or classism or xenophobia in our everyday lives. That is not what imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome is simply just you not feeling like you are qualified or good enough. It's not a replacement for times when we, quite frankly, are actually being discriminated against. So I want to make that super, super clear as I start to talk about how to overcome imposter syndrome. I'm not going to be talking about how to overcome systemic racism because, quite frankly, we only have 30 minutes together, and that's a lot. But we will we'll talk about really the way to overcome imposter syndrome, because even though there is systemic racism and classism and all of that in the world, that doesn't mean that feelings of doubt and fraud don't still exist. And so really, if you only remember one thing that I tell you today, it is that you are not an imposter, and you are learning, and you're new at things, and that's okay. All right, so there are, according to Dr. Valerie Young, 5 types of imposter. So I think we should go over them as a group and see if these types of imposters feel true and see like which ones we might, fall into. Okay, so first we have the perfectionist. So this is someone who's like hyper focused on how things should be done, right? Everything has to be perfectly executed. Anything that's a flaw or anything that may go wrong, that really takes their competence into question. And so perfectionists tend to have really, really extreme high goals. They also feel like even if they reach 99% of that goal, that's not success, that's failure. So they often feel like if it's not 100%, then you might as well not even do it. The next type of imposter is the expert. So this is someone who kind of nods along to everything because they're afraid of being perceived to be stupid, or just unknowledgeable about the topic at hand. Oftentimes our experts actually feel like they need validation from certificates or trainings or degrees before they feel comfortable and confident in taking something on. So this is someone who won't apply for a job unless they know they meet every single requirement. It's also someone who doesn't feel totally comfortable with asking questions or speaking their mind during meetings because they don't want to create any kind of potential opportunity where they unveil that they don't actually know all of the answers. We also then have the natural genius. The natural genius is kind of like someone who's if you try it and you fail once, that's it, then this is not for you. And so natural geniuses tend to expect to get everything right on their first try. I'm really guilty of this, but when it comes to hobbies, I don't want to try a new hobby if I'm going to be bad at it. Even if it's something that super, super interests me, I'm like, nope, I need to be the best at this before I can try it. Natural geniuses really struggle and they have a lot of difficulties in trying new things because they think if they fail, then it's just not meant to be. And then we have the soloist. Soloists they have to do everything themselves, right? So asking for help is shameful. It's a sign of weakness. If you do something and you succeed, it has to be completely because you did it yourself. They have a really, really hard time admitting when they need help. And so because if they ask for help, that means that they're failing, right? It means if I can't do it on my own, then I shouldn't even do it. And then the last one is the superhuman, right? So being outstanding, efficient, the best student, the best brother, sister, friend, whatever. That is how they measure their success, is they can do it all. They push themselves to work as hard as possible. They can handle every single thing in life that gets handed to them. And if they're not performing 100% across every single bucket of life, then they've failed and they are terrible and everybody's going to find out that they're such an imposter. So I know I'm looking in the chat. It feels like a lot of you have been seen. I'm probably calling out a lot of you in my descriptions here. So which one are you now that you know all of them? Were you a combination? How are you feeling? Yeah, all of the above. Soloist. Yeah, expert. Yeah, I definitely see myself as a combination of all of them. But I think I'm definitely someone who has a really, really hard time asking for help. So definitely a soloist. Yeah, a lot of combinations. All right. Well, what do all of these imposters have in common? They don't ask for help. They don't think they belong. Expectations. They're pursuing a career in tech. Yeah. Well, so I went in and I thought about this of, what do all of these imposters have in common? And I think it's actually, they're all afraid to fail. right? There's this common theme of if I can't do X, then I failed, or if I have to ask for help, then I fail. So really, when you peel the layers, it's a fear of failure that they all have in common. So, how do we overcome imposter syndrome? Well, we have to get a little bit more comfortable with failing, because getting comfortable with failure can actually help heal our imposter syndrome. So there is quite a bit of information on this slide, but basically, there's a few ways that I have approached this to get comfortable with failure. I'm going to be real with you all. I am still very uncomfortable with failure, but there are definitely moments in my life where I was way more uncomfortable with it than I am now. So, a couple of things that I have done to make myself get a little bit more comfy with failing. Instead of seeing your failure as a setback, we want to change our mindset. And I think someone had said it in the chat of like, oh, everybody has like this negative mindset. Yeah, we need to get a little bit more comfortable with setbacks are positive, right? They can be learning opportunities. They can be a redirection. They can be progress towards a goal that you're working on. I'll give you an example of a time that I really thought I failed was when I first finished undergrad. I applied to probably 1,000 jobs. And a little about me, I was a creative writing major. And, 10 years ago, and even probably now, honestly, there weren't a lot of jobs for creative writing majors. So I thought, oh my God, I failed. I got this degree. I spent all this time and energy getting a degree, and now I can't find a job. I had to really, really work on that mindset and kind of peel it back and say, okay, this is a learning opportunity. I might have to pivot and try a different career, but this is just progress towards something new. That was really hard to do. I'm not going to lie. It took a while to actually see that I wasn't a failure. But here we are. We've pivoted. We're doing good so far. Another, way to kind of just like change that mindset is to actually start vocalizing positive thoughts, even when you fail or in times of kind of uncertainty when you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if anyone else is like this, but I'm a do it for the plot kind of girly. So every time I am faced with a challenge, or I feel like I'm going to like fail at something, or I have failed at something, I always say like, ooh, plot twist, or like, I'm going to do something and see what happens because, we do it for the plot. So a lot of the time I like, and this might be my creative writing background, but I see a lot of my life as like a fun story that I'm telling instead of like actually living. So a lot of it is, do it for the plot. This is a great plot twist. We're going to vocalize those positive thoughts and speak that into action. And another thing is really just being able to define your fear of failing. Why are we actually afraid to fail? I had to, unpack this a little bit. And I found out that I'm afraid to fail because I am a child of immigrants and I know how hard my parents worked to make sure that I had a good life and that I could go off and do all of these amazing things that they wanted their children to be able to accomplish. And so my fear of failure actually came from my fear of disappointing my parents. A lot of the time, other people might, have a fear of failure and then they unpack it and it's like, well, actually, I'm afraid of what other people might think of me, or I'm afraid of being broke. I spent all this money in college and now I don't have a job. Maybe I'm afraid of like the financial struggles that will happen if I don't find a job. There's a lot of different ways that fear of failure actually manifests. And a lot of the time, it's not actually you being afraid to fail. It's you being afraid of something else that you have to kind of unpack for yourself. And so the last thing is being able to talk about failure. This can really get you past that hump of like, I am terrified to fail, and now I have imposter syndrome because I'm like overcompensating. But if we just all start talking about our failures, imposter syndrome really thrives in silence. And I know a lot of us are on LinkedIn and we constantly see people bragging and talking about all their successes, but how often do we see people talking about their failures? Not that often. So if we can get comfortable and really normalize the the act of sharing our failures and being open and being vulnerable, imposter syndrome is going to start to be minimized. We can connect over like a shared fear of failure, and really help us as a group move past feeling like imposters. And so imposter syndrome, overcoming that takes a lot of practice. I've mentioned that this is something that I've been working on and I still continue to work on. So this is not an overnight solution by any means, but I think when we are armed with the right resources and the right tips there, we can help each other and ourselves overcome it. So a couple of tips that I thought of. One is like really intentionally acknowledging your accomplishments and your abilities. So this is a practice really in mindfulness. And so, it can be compared to mindfulness. This is kind of how I practice mindfulness, because honestly, I am not a meditation type of person. But, when we push ourselves to remain in the present, as opposed to thinking about the future or worrying about where we've come from in the past and all of the work that we did and yada, 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 we can focus more clearly on like the reality of our situations. And then that is a way to like let anxious thoughts kind of go. When you are like, where am I right now? Feel the earth under your feet. Where am I? How am I feeling? You can start to understand a little bit more on like, okay, I'm going to take ownership of like my accomplishments and of my failures. And then this way, you're just living life rather than focusing on what's next or what used to be. So for example, like let's say your boss or your professor or whoever you're working with has given you an assignment and you don't feel equipped to lead. They're like, here's the work, do it. Instead of like catastrophizing, right? Or spiraling about, oh my God, why did my boss choose me to do this? Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. Everything is going to go wrong because I don't know XYZ. Instead, take a step back and think of, what could go right, what this opportunity could give to you. You really just stay present and acknowledge your reality. Your boss gave you this work because they believe that you can do it. So trust yourself that you can do it. One of the tactics that I kind of like to use in this is I have a monthly wins tracker. One, because again, child of immigrants. So I was never allowed to brag as a kid. Even if I did something really good, I was always being told, you need to be humble. So that was really hard to learn as an adult, to like kind of take my wins into my own hands. So I created a wins tracker. So I have 2 columns. One is like the type of win, right? Like, I submitted a really great proposal and everybody really liked it, or whatever it might be. And then the actions that it took me to get there, because everyone needs a reminder that when you have a win, it is not just good luck. It is not a coincidence. You put in the work to get that win. If you need a tracker like me to remember that, then so be it. But I think it's really important that you work on tracking your wins and being able to kind of look back and be like, wow, look at how far I've come. The next thing is to just be strategic, not reactive. We need to be able to make plans. Imposter syndrome really can creep in when you feel overwhelmed and like lost in the details. My mom used to always say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I think that is also a Taylor Swift lyric now. But let me set the record straight. My mama said it first. Basically, planning, being proactive is a really great tool to making sure that you're, you're not letting imposter syndrome take over. So I like to take all of my goals that I have and break them up into like manageable chunks. Because let's say like my goal is to, because I'm a recruiter, my goal is to hire 50 people. Well, that's insane. How will I do that? I have to break it up, right? And say, okay, well, maybe in this month I'll hire 3 people, and in this month I'll work on this so I can hire 10 more people. When you plan to tackle everything at the same time, you can quickly overwhelm yourself. So we want to make sure that we're, aiming to be just 1% better every day. And so one of the tactics that I use for this is I schedule time on my calendar for literally everything, not just meetings. If I want to check email, if I want to post on LinkedIn, if I want to just even set my intentions for the week, I schedule everything on my calendar so that I am holding myself accountable. The next way is to really thoughtfully build out your community. And you all are already so ahead of the game because you have ColorStack, which is such a wonderful community that I wish I had when I was in college. But think about the people that you surround yourself with every day and keep those people close, because they're also going to help build you back up when you fail. And we all fail, so it's inevitable, it's going to happen. But, and this is a caveat, don't compare yourself to the people that are in your community, because we all are living our own journeys. We all are on our own paths. So your story is going to not ever match someone else's story. And so we want to really be mindful of like, we are part of a community, but we're not competing against each other. And so honestly, the way that I like to do this is I just build time out to network. And remember that networking is actually a really personal thing. So you're not networking to go out and be like, hey, great to connect with you, I'm looking for a job. It's like, use networking as an opportunity to really like get to know people that will help you on your journey to getting better at whatever it is that you want to get better at. And then the last thing, and I think probably the most important thing that we all tend to forget about, is we need to really prioritize our physical, emotional, and mental health, because imposter syndrome hits the hardest when you don't feel good. When you aren't feeling your best, that is your brain then gets to work in overdrive and be like, well, you feel like this because you're a failure, or you feel like this because you didn't do this, this, and this, and now everyone knows that you suck. No, that's not the case. But when we feel bad, we don't tend to prioritize our physical, mental, and emotional health. So it's something that we really want to make sure that we do. And honestly, I'm still working on this, but the way that I have kind of started to more so prioritize my health is I schedule and I normalize mental health days. So if I am taking a mental health day, I am telling every single person that I am taking time off because of a mental health day. I don't say, oh, I'm taking just PTO. Like, I normalize that I'm not feeling my best and I need a mental health day. I also try really hard to work like movement that I enjoy and healthy meals into just like my everyday schedule. And then, I'm a treat yourself kind of girl. So sometimes you need a little treat. My favorites are like getting a facial, reading a book, taking my dog to the park. Work treats into your everyday life, because first of all, life is too short to not have treats. And second of all, you don't need to deserve a treat to have a treat. So whatever you think a treat is, let yourself have it. You don't need to earn your treats. And that is, another takeaway. Like, the only thing you remember is, you deserve a treat all the time. You don't need to earn it. Cool. All right. So let's talk takeaways. Reframe failure as a potential opportunity, redirection, or progress. You are going to have setbacks in life. That is inevitable. The thing that actually really is like the difference between a setback and a redirection or progress is honestly how you respond to things. So if you look at setback as, well, I failed. There I go again, failing. You're never going to move forward. So if you instead reframe it as, oh, plot twist, let's see where this takes me, you're going to have a much better time. The next is to celebrate your wins and normalize talking about your fails. I know that talking about failure takes a lot of vulnerability. And this is something that is part of our emotional intelligence, that it is a muscle that we need to work on. But if you start talking about your failures, you're going to inspire other people and empower other people to start talking about their failures. And that creates such an amazing, community of people who can celebrate the good and also, recognize the bad. And if you just talk about those failures and you put it out there and you say, hey, look, I tried this new thing and I'm not good at it, but I'm going to keep going, you're going to make a lot of other people feel like they can also talk about it. And lastly is, don't let imposter syndrome hold you back from trying. I spent a lot of my time thinking, okay, I'm not good at that. I can't do this. So I'm not even going to try. And quite frankly, I missed out on a lot of really cool opportunities because I was too afraid to put my neck back out there and try at something that I'm bad at. And so here I am, 10 years later, telling you that if you let those feelings of that you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, that you're going to like ruin everything, hold you back from trying, you are going to quickly, realize that you could have had everything that you wanted if you just let yourself have it. So the only thing that imposter syndrome really does is hold you back. So I think I'm at time, but if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I would absolutely love that. Duolingo also is hiring. So you can go to our careers page if you want to come and work with me. And then follow us on Instagram. I think a lot of you already follow us on Twitter, so I'm not going to advertise. No, not Twitter, TikTok. But yeah, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I post lots of content on there. And that's it. Oh, we have actually a couple of minutes for Q&A, right? So if anyone had questions.
Yeah.
It's also cool if you don't. Oh, I see a question. So what was my greatest strength that helped me pivot? That's a really good question. I don't know, actually. I think it's something that I had to work on, of just like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm also someone who every once in a while, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but every once in a while I'm like, oop, time to like blow up life, right? And like do something crazy. So I think that like naturally, I also just like change, and I like crave change. And so I think that helps you pivot a lot in your career and in life in general. Oh, I'm just discovering the Q&A tab. Sorry. I'll answer like 2, and then I think y'all are gonna kick me off. So, do I think social media has a big impact in imposter syndrome? Yeah, I do actually. I'm not really on social media because of that. And I think a lot of the time we get really like caught up in like likes and shares and things like, and people like kind of agreeing with us, but it doesn't like lend itself to like actually meaningful connection. And I think a lot of the time imposter syndrome, without meaningful connection to help you get past imposter syndrome, you are continually going to feel that way, especially if you're constantly comparing yourself to people that you see online. Nothing really online is real. So with that in mind, social media can be great because it can connect people, but it can also be really detrimental to your mental health. How can managers or colleagues support someone experiencing imposter syndrome? That is such a good question. I think one of the best ways that I've had a manager support me during my imposter syndrome, and this is actually the person who showed me the having a column of wins and the work that it took to get there, is if you're a manager or you have people that you are working with, remind them of their strengths and their successes. My manager, when I first got out of college, my first job out of college, she was the one who was like, hey, listen, bragging is okay. Humble bragging is better, but you should be able to own your wins and talk about them, because it's going to remind you about all of the amazing things that you do and the work that it takes to do those things. So yeah, I would say if you are trying to support someone who's struggling through imposter syndrome, the best way to do that is to hype them up. How does imposter syndrome differ from other forms of self-doubt or low self-esteem? Well, I guess it really kind of all depends on if you have self-doubt or low self-esteem around things that are trying new things or your skills or your abilities, then that is more so, I think, imposter syndrome. If you're telling yourself, oh, I can't do this because of everyone thinks I'm fake, or I'm I don't actually know what I'm doing, I think that's more imposter syndrome. General low self-esteem or self-doubt, I think, is more intrinsic. It's more internalized. I don't feel like I'm enough because of XYZ. But I think imposter syndrome can sometimes come from low self-esteem can sometimes come from you focusing on external things to give you validation, whereas imposter syndrome is more internalized. All right. And I think this might be the last question. So can imposter syndrome reoccur? Or is it something that one can permanently overcome? I don't think, I would love to believe that you can permanently overcome imposter syndrome, but I don't think that is a realistic expectation to put on ourselves. Let me be really clear. Imposter syndrome is so normal. It's so normal from someone who is just leaving college to someone who is the CEO at a Fortune 500 company. It is, everybody feels this way. When I was younger, I used to tell my dad oh, when I'm an adult, I'm gonna have my shit together and I'm gonna do XYZ and I'm gonna know all of these things. And I told him I was gonna know all of that stuff by the time I was 30. And so when I turned 30, he actually wrote in my birthday card, did you find out that everybody's faking it? Did you finally realize that no one actually knows what they're doing? And it's almost beautiful in a way that we're all in this together, no matter how respected we are, no matter how accomplished we are. No one really fully knows everything and what they're doing. And everyone is going to have, self-doubt. But I will leave you with a quote from the Avett Brothers, which I don't know if anyone listens to that band, but one of the things that they have a song that one of the lyrics is, decide what to be and go be it. I kind of follow that in my day-to-day of just whatever I'm going to be, I'm just going to go and be the best one of those that I can be. So yeah, thanks everybody. It was so good to see you all. I love Color Stack. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much, y'all. Give it up to Dahlia one more time. Congrats. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I know I was listening in and I was like, okay, so you took and that is just so helpful for people to just realize that we're not in this alone and that all of us are trying to figure it out. It doesn't matter what age you are, where you come from, we're all panicking inside. And if we talked about it a little bit more, we could realize that we're not all living in this like pressure cooker by ourselves. All of us are in it. Yeah. So with the time being, we're gonna do our giveaway question. So the first person in the chat to let us know what it is the giveaway winner. So the question is, are y'all ready to type? You're gonna type this into the chat. Whoever does it the first right answer, you're the person who wins. So the question is, what do all types of imposters have in common? Fear. Okay. Oh, this is hard because it just keeps. Okay, hold on. Let's see. The results say Susie. Susie, yeah. Shout out to you, Susie. The Color Stack team will be chatting with you next week about how to get your juicy giveaways. With that being said, thank you so much. Y'all show all the love in the chat as well as the emojis of how much you absolutely love this Duolingo session. It was so much fun and it was so real. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Right. All right, y'all. So now we are going to head and transition to 15 minutes of roundtables in the lounge space. So we also have a general networking tables hosted by other members of the Color Stack team. So feel free to join either table. And at 2:15, we have CrowdStrike talking about building a community at work. So I'll see you in a few minutes, okay?